Alright, in this tutorial I'm going to show you how you can create this animation with two different emitters, two different color fluid particles with a force field, and how to set up the fluid interactions from two different emitters and all the way through to the rendering process. Alright, the first thing we're going to do is build the cup. And the cup is going to be the container that holds the particles. Alright, so I'm just going to press 1 to go in the front side view. I'm going to go ahead and press N to bring out the side panel. I'm going to add mesh, and I'm just going to use a... I'm going to do it with a cylinder. Just make it super simple. Alright, now I'm going to grab this on the Z axis and move it up 1 meter. So it's GZ1 enter. Alright, now I'm going to press tab to go into edit mode. Put this on face select, select this top face, and then press delete and choose faces. So now we just basically have a hollow cup. Now let's add some thickness to this. So I press tab to exit edit mode, and I'm going to come over here to the modifiers tab, add modifier, and I'm going to add a solidify, and then I'm going to adjust this. I'm going to adjust it on the negative value so it comes out this way. Alright, and just set it to about 0.1 minus 0.1. Alright, and then I'm going to go ahead and click here and click apply. Now this is not a fancy cup, but we're not looking for a fancy cup in this example, but we're going to go ahead and press tab to go back into edit mode and make a little bit of changes to it just to make it look halfway decent. Alright, go ahead and stick this on edge select, zoom in just a little bit, and then right click on one of these edges and then press alt right click. That way it selects all of them around, and then press shift and then alt right click. Alright, and then do the same thing with the bottom, shift alt right click. So now you have all of the ones around at the bottom selected and all the ones around this rim selected. Now press Control B, and that's your bevel select. Control B, and now you can drag this out, but see, it's only making one extra face, so just turn your scroll wheel on your mouse up 1 notch so that it adds an extra face and makes it rounded, and you can adjust the bevel by moving your mouse. Just move it to about there, and then that's good enough for this example. Alright, we're going to go ahead and give this a material while we're at it. Go to the materials tab, click on new, change this from principled to glass, and that will pretty much be it. One more thing I forgot to do. Go ahead and press tab one more time. Go to this inner edge, right click to select one of the edges, and then alt right click to select all of them, and then press Control B and drag this out and make a little bit of a bevel right there too. And this, you're not really going to see this bevel and hear this much, but it's important to do that so that whenever we turn on smooth shading, it doesn't look all black down here. Because smooth shading, if this was all just one piece, one edge, a 90-degree edge, essentially, it would make the whole bottom kind of look black. Alright, so we don't want it to look that way. Now we can go ahead and press tab to exit edit mode. Alright, now let's go ahead and finish up the material. We set it to glass, and then change the roughness basically to 0. And that's pretty much it. Now, if we could make this a slightly different color, but I'm just going to keep it completely clear so we can see through it a whole lot easier. Alright, now let's go ahead and press 1 to go back into front side view. And before we go any further, I'm going to go ahead and save this project. File, save, and just save it wherever you want. I'm just going to save it here, and I'm just leaving it untitled, but save it however you want. Alright, now let's go ahead and build the ramps that's going to pour into this. Alright, now let's start off with a cube for this. Add mesh and then cube. Now I'm just gonna, just so we have room to work, I'm just gonna press G for grab, Z for the Z axis, and then move it up here. And I'm going to scale this on the Z axis, S for scale, Z, and then just bring it down to about right here. Now I'm going to press 7 to go into top side view. Now I'm going to press G for grab, X for the X axis, and then just bring it over here. Now I'm going to make it a little bit smaller on the Y axis. S for scale, Y for the Y axis, and then bring it down to about right here. And I'm not being precise with how small or large I'm making this. Alright. Now let's go into edit mode. But before we go into edit mode, because we're going to add some bevels, anytime we change the size of something that's going to be a physics object, we obviously need to apply the scale. But even if we're not making a physics object, and we're going to, if we change the size of it like now, like in the viewport and not in edit mode, we still need to apply the scale if we're going to apply a bevel to it within edit mode, because sometimes it will cause a glitch that way. So let's go ahead and apply the scale. Control A to bring up this menu and apply the scale. And now all these numbers are showing 1. Now if I was to press Control Z, don't do this. If I was to press Control Z, I basically unapplied the scale, and you can see all these numbers are not 1, so we do need to apply the scale. Control A and apply scale. Alright, now it's all 1, so we're good to go. Alright, now let's press tab to go into edit mode. Alright, now put this on face select. Select this top face, and then press, well actually we want to select that top face and this front face. So select the top face, shift select the front face, and then press delete and choose faces. Now you have kind of a slide. Alright, now press A once or twice until everything is selected. Press 1 to go into front side view, and then just press G for grab, and then just bring it down to around right in here. It doesn't have to be perfect yet. And then press S for scale, and then X for the X axis, and then just make it about how long you think this needs to be, which I'm gonna guess about right there. Alright, now let's basically, I think that's about right. So let's go ahead and press tab to exit edit mode. And right now, since we moved this in edit mode, our point of origin is up here. So let's go ahead and fix that. Come up here to object, set origin to geometry. Now the origin's back where it should be. Alright, now let's solidify this so that it has some thickness. Go to the modifiers tab, add modifier, go to solidify, and then, whoops, wrong one. Go here and set this to, let's say 0.1 also, 0.1, but make sure we click even thickness. Alright, and now click apply. Now go back into front side view, and this is where we're going to align this. Basically, we want to put the edge of this right about the edge of this. That way the particles can shoot or can slide off into it. Alright, so I'm going to press G for grab, and then X for the X-axis, and then just bring it about right to that line. Now press R for rotate, and then Y for the Y-axis, and then just rotate it about probably about, let's say, 8 degrees. Well, let's put it at 10 degrees. So we're going to put this at -10. Alright. Now that we have the angle right, we can go ahead and fine adjust the position of this. So once again, press G for grab, and then just put it at about right there. Alright, so pretty much at that position, most of it, if not all of it, will go into the cup. Alright, press 1. Now we want to make a duplicate of this ramp, because the duplicate of this ramp is going to be on this side. So press Shift D and then enter. Now right now you have the second one selected. It automatically selected the duplicate. So up here on the X-axis, change this, just put a minus in front of it, so it moves it over to that side. And then on the rotation on the Z-axis, just put in 180. That way it rotates it around 180 degrees on the Z-axis. And then it's in the same exact position relative to this, but on the mirrored aspect, I guess you could say. Probably not saying that exactly right, but you know what I mean. Alright, now let's go ahead and add a material to these, which I probably should have done before I duplicated it, but that's okay. We'll make them 2 different colors, so it really doesn't matter. So click on the Materials tab, click New. I'm going to keep this on Principled, and I'm going to make this a dark color. I'm going to make this a really dark blue. Let's see, going to put this in RGB, bring the other colors all the way down, and then set the blue to about 0.3. Alright, and the roughness I'll keep it set to about 0.25. Alright, and then on this one, let's make this one a dark red. New, keep it on Principle, changes to red, and set the red to about 0.3, and then turn the rest of them down to 0. Alright, and we'll also put this on about 0.25 for the roughness. Alright, now let's go ahead and apply some physics attributes to these. With this ramp selected, come up here to the Physics tab, and then click on Collision. And these soft body ones down here, we don't need those, so just go ahead and collapse those. And we'll keep the friction on these set to 0. And then the dampening, we'll have that set to, let's say, 0.5. Alright. And same thing on this one. Select that one, click Collision, friction to 0, and then dampening to 0.5. Basically, there's going to be no friction for the particles so that they slide down easily, and the dampening, it's going to, as far as bounciness, half the energy of the bounce is going to be dissipated every time it makes contact. Simple enough. Now with the cup, we want this a little bit different. Collision, we want the dampening to be a little bit higher because we don't want the particles to bounce off the walls and bounce out, or bounce off the floor and bounce out. So we're going to turn the dampening up to 0.75, and we eventually want the particles to kind of settle. We don't want them to be spinning, so we're going to go ahead and turn the friction up to 0.1. That way they'll move around a little bit, but eventually they'll settle. Alright, now while we have this selected, let's go ahead and come up here to Object, and then put this on shade smooth. Where's it at? Did they move it on me? Here it is. I'm going blind apparently. Alright. So now it looks like it has more geometry than it actually does. And that's one reason we need to put this bevel down here, because if we was to take that bevel out, it would look all weird and shadowy, kind of like it does on the edge right here, even though it won't show up too much in the render. Alright, now this is a good point to go ahead and save the project. File, save. Alright, now let's go ahead and put a floor down here. And this is mostly for looks, but we're going to go ahead and make the floor a collision object also. That way any stray particles that do make it out onto the floor, out of the cup or off the ramps, it can land on the floor. Add mesh and then plane. Alright, now we're just going to scale this up by 20, S for scale, 20, enter. Alright, we'll zoom in and we'll bring this floor down here to right at the edge. Grab Z and just stick it right there. Just barely overlapping. Alright. Now the floor is obviously a collision object and these do not read 1, so let's go ahead and press Ctrl A and apply the scale. Now the floor, we're just going to make this a black color. And these are very simple materials. I'm not trying to make fancy materials here. It's just something basic. I'm just teaching you the process of mostly the particles, but you know. Alright, now what we need to do at this point, we need to put an emitter right here and an emitter right here. And that way this emitter can put out one color and this emitter can put out a different color. Alright, so the easiest way to go ahead and align this is basically select one of these and then press tab. Alright, and then come over here and select this face right here and then press Shift S to bring up this pie menu and then choose cursor to selected, and then it puts the world origin or cursor right here. And then now when we exit edit mode, if we press add mesh and then a plane, now this plane is going to be our emitter. It already has it in this position, so it makes it a little bit simpler. Now what we need to do is press 7 to go in the top side view. I'm going to go ahead and put this on wireframe so we can actually see what we're doing better. I'm going to kind of zoom in and let's go ahead and adjust the size of this on the y-axis so that it fits inside this. S for scale, Y, and then just drag it to about right there. Alright, now let's scale it on the x-axis. Well, actually at this point let's go ahead and go in the front side view. We'll kind of zoom in and then let's press R for rotate and then Y for the y-axis, and then we'll just kind of line it up with the angle of this ramp. Alright, now let's scale it on the z-axis. And then just make it about right there. Now this is where it gets not as precise. You just got to press G for grab and then just move it out away from the edge just a little bit. Alright, that way particles are not trying to be generated inside this collision object. Alright, now let's kind of look at it, make sure that we're not having any conflicts, and we look good. Basically just making sure none of the edges are within this ramp. Alright, now this is a physics object, so we do need to apply the scale. Control A and apply the scale. Now we're going to do a little bit of testing here to get our directions, or to get it kind of set up the way we want. And this is probably a good time, just go ahead and press File and Save. Alright, we need to make this emitter, we're going to go ahead and name this emitter, and we're going to call this emitter left. Emitter left. Alright, now come over here to the particle tab, click plus, and right now we're just going to get the directions correct. We're not worried about the size at this point. Although we do need to make this a little bit smaller, simply so it's not colliding with this. So let's go ahead and make that smaller. Come down here to render and viewport, open those two up, and then adjust this viewport probably to 0.02. Alright, and then go to the scale on the render and change it to the same thing, 0.02. Enter. Alright, and we can go ahead and uncheck this show emitter on the render tab. That way whenever we render this, it doesn't actually render the emitter. We'll just go ahead and get that out of the way now. Alright, now open up the velocity tab, and then on this normal, we'll I think that's the one we're going to use on this one. I believe the normal is going in this direction. So let's say if I was to press play right now, yeah, that's going the correct direction, and probably about the correct speed also. So we really don't have to adjust this one at this point. So our velocities are good to go. So let's go ahead and estimate how many particles we need, because we're going to keep them this size so that we don't have to use a huge amount of particles, because we don't want it to take an entire day to bake. This is something that I suspect the average laptop should be able to bake within an hour. That's what I'm shooting for. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and come up here to the lifetime and then change that to, let's say, I want to just put a large number in it, an arbitrarily high number. That way we know the particles will not die, apparently, or at any point. They'll stay forever, essentially, for the entire animation. Alright, we need to estimate how many particles we're going to have. Now, don't actually play along at this point. Just watch what I'm doing so you can see how I go about estimating this. Now, I want the entire animation to be, let's say, 500 frames. Alright. And I want these particles to basically fill up the cup by 250 frames. So I'm going to go ahead and set this right here to 50. And you'll see what I'm doing here in a minute. I'm going to leave it set to 1000 so I get a baseline. And I'm going to press play. And I'm going to see basically how many particles that adds up to. Alright, now I've made my first mistake. Right now, I should have changed the physics from Newtonian to fluid. That was my first mistake. Alright, now let me go ahead and go to deflection, choose size deflect. Now go ahead and make these changes right now while I'm doing this. Change it to fluid, change it to size deflect, go to integration, and we want to keep this panel open right now for sure. We can go ahead and close this panel, and we can go ahead and close, well, we can't really close that one without closing all of them, but because we need to keep the integration open for now. But we can go ahead and close the deflection. Alright, because we're going to need to adjust the subframes here in a minute. But now I'm going to go ahead and start what I was doing a while ago. I want to get just some kind of idea of how much space that amount of particles is going to fill up, which is basically nothing. You see, not much to it at all. So, and since this is just 1,000 particles, if I was to put in, let's say, 50,000 particles, I know it's going to be 50 times that amount. And then I'll press play one more time. Now that's obviously too many particles. It can't keep up with that. So let's go ahead, and since we have this set to 50 right here, which is, we want all the particles to be generated in 250 frames. Let's go ahead and divide this by 5, which is 10,000. Because being that 50 goes into 250 5 times, right? Now if I was to press play one more time, now this right here is because we don't have any sub steps. Now I can tell you that's probably going to be pretty close to right, but we need to add sub steps to it. Alright, let's go ahead and add 9 subframes. And I'm going to press play one more time. It's going to be smoother. It's going to look better essentially. And alright, that's actually looking pretty good, but I can tell you right now the number of particles we're going to need is going to be significant. So what I'm going to do at this point is adjust the size of these particles. I'm going to set this to 0.04, make them twice the size. 0.04. Alright, go ahead and change the size of these two. Make sure you have it set to 9 subframes. Uncheck show emitter on the render portion. Alright, now let's go ahead and add another 2 more meshes. Add mesh and then icosphere. Alright, grab this icosphere on the z-axis and then just bring it down here. And we'll call this one ico left. Ico left. Alright, now click on the materials tab and we're going to just give it a principal material, but we're not changing the colors right now. And then press Shift D and then X. That way we have another one over here. And then right here where it's got 2, let's click on that. That way there are 2 separate materials now, not the same material. Alright, now this one right here is our red one. So we're going to make this one a blue color. We'll make it kind of a light blue. Alright, and this one right here is our blue ramp. So we're going to make this one kind of a light red color. Simple enough. Let's go back here to the emitter and let's finish up that. Let's come down here to where it's in the render panel, change this from halo to object, and now we want to add this object right there. That way the particles are going to be this sphere, although they're going to be the size we was messing with before. And then on the viewport, change this from rendered to point or circle. Probably circle. Circle's probably easier to visualize. Alright, now let's finish getting the number of particles correct. Alright, now that's 10,000 particles. Probably be a good time to press save. And let's go ahead and click play. Now we can tell right away we have too many particles being generated in too short of a period of time. And I also saw one more thing. This floor right here, we never did apply a physics property to it. So select the floor, go to collision, and then set the dampening to 0.75. That way it has very little bounce. It stops bouncing really quick. And then the friction, set that to 0.1. Alright. Now let's go back to this emitter. Go back to the particle settings. And let's change this to 100. And again, you don't have to do what I'm doing right now. I'm just kind of doing this to estimate the settings. This is a process I go through, and there's probably a better way to go about it. But this is the process I go through. And it works for me, essentially. Alright, now let's go ahead and change this to, let's go ahead and change it to 250. Now I can tell you right now, it will be fine at 250, but it won't be enough volume. Alright, I could tell part of the problem here is that the particles are not coming out of the emitter quick enough. So change this from 1 to 2 on the normal. That way the particles are shooting out twice as fast. Now if I press play one more time. Alright, now it's not going to fill up very much. It's going to fill up to, actually that's doing pretty good. That's actually almost right. We're going to need to add just a little bit more, because by the time this emitter fills it up, it's going to come up to about here, or about here after it settles. So I'll tell you what we're going to do. We're going to set this to 12,000 just to add just a few more particles, and we're going to come down here to let's see, the substeps, subframes, and I'm going to change this to 19. It's just going to add a little bit more stability to it. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and play through this one more time. Of course, my system is significantly quicker than a laptop, so if you're trying to do this on a laptop, it's not going to preview nowhere near as smooth as this unless you have a really high-end laptop. But yeah, which is one reason why I'm going through this, and you don't have to actually follow along, because I'm just trying to determine the right settings. That way you don't have to go through this long, laborious process. Because I used to do this, all these testing when I was only using a laptop, and it would take forever. I mean, it would be prohibitively time consuming in a lot of ways. Let's see, this is, I want to pay attention to how long it takes for all these particles to get down here, because we're probably going to change the total number of frames. Yeah. Alright. But the amount of particles in the volume is about right. I'm going to keep that the same. And let's change this to 800. Now, we may not need that many, but it's better. We don't have to render all of them, essentially what I'm saying. We can render 600 or 700 of the frames and not the last 100 or 200. Alright, now let's do one more thing now that we've got it for the most part figured out. Go to cache, click disk cache, and since we've been fiddling with this a lot, let's just click on delete all bakes just to make sure that any cache that's saved is freed. That way we can start off fresh. Now this is a really good time to go ahead and press File and Save. That save button will save you a lot of time. It will save you a lot of headache. It will save you a lot of heartache. So, yes, press save often. Save is your friend. Alright, now, and this right here really doesn't have to do with this tutorial, but I just want to point this out. I've had a lot of problems with the compression when it comes to the cache on fluid simulations. Compression saves a lot of disk space, but for some reason it can get glitchy, so I always leave compression off, but it will take up significantly more disk space. However, with the amount of particles that we have here, which is 12,000 per emitter, it's not going to take up much disk space at all. I mean, you're talking probably a gigabyte total for all of this is all it's going to have, so no big deal for this, but just keep that in mind in the future. Alright, now let's go ahead and rename some of these items just so it makes more sense over here. Let's click here and we'll just rename this ramp left. Alright, click this one and rename that ramp right. Of course, we probably should have done all this whenever we created these, but you know, I have a bad habit of not renaming these things. I have a bad habit. Let's just put it that way. Alright, let's change this and name it to cup. And select this and name it floor. Alright, now go back here and then press Shift D, enter, and before we go any further, see how right here it shows 2? We want to click that so that the new emitter, the duplicate emitter, is a separate particle system, and I'll explain why here in a minute. But with the second emitter selected right here, let's go ahead and rename this, and we're going to name it emitter right. Alright, now up here on the x-axis this direction, get rid of this minus. Alright, now the emitter moved over here. Now we need to rotate on the z-axis. Just press 180 on the rotation for the z-axis, and now it's perfectly in place over there. See what I mean? Very simple. And that's all because it helped a whole lot that we did the ramps the same exact way we did these emitters. It keeps everything aligned nice and neat. I'm kind of a symmetrical person in terms of how my mind works, so yeah. I don't know why I told you that. That's kind of weird. But anyway, now that we have these particle systems separated, we need to do one more thing. Come down here to the object, instance object, and change it from ICO left to okay, I see, I messed up here. Alright, this one right here is called ICO left. This one's called ICO left 001. We need to rename this. Rename this to ICO right. Alright, should have done that whenever we added the ICOs. Alright, now come back over here to this emitter, come down here to the instancing object, and then set this to ICO right. That way this emitter is using this icosphere, and this emitter is using this icosphere. Now we need to do one more thing to get the particles to interact with each other. But I'm going to show you what it looks like when they don't interact first. Alright, go ahead and make sure on emitter right you have disk cache selected. Now this is a really good time to press File and Save. Alright, you don't have to do this part unless you want to, but I'm just going to press play, and if you watch the particles, they're just going through each other. They're acting like they're not even there, and whenever they get basically at frame 250, whenever it gets there, the volume is not going to be twice the volume of one emitter, because all the particles are ignoring each other. These particles coming out of this emitter will react only with the particles from this emitter. Same with this. But these particles will not react with these particles. That's because we have not set up fluid interactions yet. I mean, I'm sure you can look at this and see what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and press escape to stop it. And now I'm going to come down here to fluid interactions, and then I'm going to press 1 or click the plus button. And since we are currently have the emitter right selected, we want to click here and then choose emitter left. You can't see it very well, it's a bad color scheme, but right here it says emitter left, particle settings. Now come up here to the emitter left, click plus, and then add emitter right. So basically we're telling emitter left to react with emitter right, and emitter right to react with emitter left, basically. And you can add an interaction for every single emitter you have. You can add as many emitters as you want. Alright, now if we was to press File, Save, and then press play one more time, now whenever these particles hit, they're going to react with each other. Alright, so we see them reacting. Of course, they're kind of sparse right here, so they're not it's not like they're hitting a wall, but they are affecting each other to an extent. Alright, now that we have that set up, let's double check some things. Go to this panel, the cache panel, click delete all bakes, make sure this cache is selected. Go to the next one, this cache is selected. And one more thing, come down here to subframes, make sure all of them are set to 19 on both of them. And this is just double checking, just to make sure we don't run into any issues. And make sure the render sizes are the same on the viewport and render. Same way with the other emitter. Alright, I think we're good to go. Now, let's go ahead and add the force field that's going to suck the particles out of this cup. So, I'm going to select this cup, press Shift S, and then cursor to select it. That way we put the cursor back here in the origin of the cup. That way when we add the force field, where are you at? Can't hardly see. I'm getting old and blind. Here it is. And we're going to just add a simple force field. Now, this force field is starting off right here. I'm going to press G for grab and Z for the Z axis, and then just move it to probably about right here is fine. And we're going to come over here to the physics properties, and if we put this on a positive number, it's going to repel particles. It's basically going to push them away from the center of this force field. So we want this on a negative number, but we don't want to activate it on frame 1. So let's say we're going to put this on. Before we do that, we need to do one more thing, otherwise our computer may lock up. Go to emitter left, go to the particle settings, and then just turn off these two temporarily. Go to emitter right, turn off these two temporarily. Alright, now go back to the force field, and then come to frame 400, because right now if we would have clicked on frame 400 without deactivating these emitters, then all of a sudden it would try to generate all 24,000 particles all at once, and if you have a really slow computer, it will just lock it up. So we went ahead and turned those off temporarily. Now we're at frame 400, and this is where we want to activate the force field. So go back to the physics tab, and we're going to set this to 0, and we're going to press I to keyframe it. And if you don't want to press I, you can always just click this right here, and that sets a keyframe also. Now we want it to slowly come on over 50 frames, so go to frame 450 and then set this to -5. I think -5 will do, and I'm going to go ahead and set the keyframe on that, because let's say we can go between these frames and we can see the settings changing, varying between 0 and 5 according to frame. Alright, now let's run a test. Now this test, we need to go to emitter left, particles, turn those back, both those back on, emitter right, turn those back on, and just so we can run this test really fast, we're going to go ahead and change this to 1200. But we will change it back to 12,000 in a minute, but we want it to run the test like 10 times faster. Alright, now I'm just going to press play, and it's going to basically go to frame 400, and when it gets to frame 400, the force field is going to start slowly turning on until it's full on at 450. And I'm just doing this to see if we have enough, if the setting is set high enough for this. And we'll see here in just a second. Alright, I can tell you, see, it's not enough, which is why I wanted to try this. Alright, now I need to go back to this one and then change this to -10, make it twice as strong, and then set the unset and then reset the keyframe. Go back to the beginning, choose one of the emitters, delete all bakes, and then press play one more time. It's so much quicker to test with fewer particles, just to get a frame of reference of if you have it set correctly. Alright, the force field is getting ready to turn on. I can tell you that's not quite enough. I need to add a little bit more. So go back to the 450 or frame 450 go back to the physics settings, uncheck, set this to -15, and then reset the keyframe. Go back to the beginning, and you don't have to do this every time, but I do it just to cut down on the glitchiness. Go back to delete all bakes, go back to the force field, and then press play one more time. And you can imagine if you want to have a very huge particle simulation, it can get kind of tedious in terms of trying to make sure you get all these settings correct, which is why I'm using such a small number of particles right now, just to get the idea. And whenever we go to bake it later, we'll have it with more particles. Alright, that's about right. Yeah, that'll work. Click pause. Now, there is one more thing we need to go ahead and do with these emitters, which I've neglected to mention before. Alright, we're going to come down here on emitter right, and then change the mass of this one ever so slightly to 0.95. Basically just 5% different in weight. And the reason why we're doing that is because we want the right or the red particles to float on top of the blue particles. It just adds a little bit of extra flair to it, I guess you could say. Alright, now let's run a test through this real quick. Let's double check. I got all these keyframes here. And let me, yeah, and I'm gonna go here, make sure these are set right real quick. And same thing right here. Alright, now let's play through it real quick with only 1200 particles per each emitter, just to make sure our force field is working correctly. Alright, should be getting ready at 400 for the force field to start turning on. It's completely on now. It's going to start moving up. It's going to stop at frame 600. Alright, and then the force field's turning off now, and drop. Alright, now I have this going out to 1,000, but I don't think we need 1,000. Probably 850 would be fine. I'm going to put it on 850. I think 100 would be fine, but 850 will give us 50 frames extra, just in case. Alright, now that we have the physics on everything working the way we want, let's go ahead and press save. And we want to press save before we change the number of particles to back up to 12,000, because sometimes when you change the number of particles in the most inconvenient of times, it will crash. So I'm just being overly cautious, because I mean, this tutorial is already almost an hour long, I believe. So let's go to the particle system for emitter right, change this to 12,000. Alright, let's go to emitter left, change this to 12,000. Alright, now come down here to the subframes, make sure this is set to 19, and make sure this is set to 19 on the other emitter also. And this is one thing I've noticed, and I have no idea why this causes a glitch, but if you look right now, these particles are out in front of the emitter. If we go back to the beginning right here, it puts them back in the center. If we don't press that to get them back in the center, then sometimes it will glitch out. So now that we have those back centered, let's go ahead and press file, save, and then come down up here to the cache and then click Bake All Dynamics. Now, on a laptop, at these settings, it's going to take probably on, kind of a 2015 and older laptop, it will take about an hour. On the laptop I had in 2012, it would take about 3 hours, maybe 4. With this computer, it's going to take about 10 minutes, maybe 15. But now that we have this baking, and it looks like it's doing it pretty much glitch free, I think we're good to go. Now, I'm going to go ahead and fast forward through the rest of this bake, but I'm going to keep it recording. That way you can see how long it took my computer to do it, just in case you want to compare it to your own, especially if you're on a laptop. But, alright, fast forwarding now. Alrighty, it looks like it's just about finished. It looks like it's going to take another probably 10 seconds to finish, and then we can play through it and see what it looks like. And of course yours is for sure still baking, being that I fast forwarded through this, but this is pretty much what you can expect. Click play. There you go. It should fill up to about right here, I believe. Yeah, pretty much exact. And the force field picks it up. Kind of a glob, kind of clinging to it, drops down in, and most of it falls back in the cup the way I wanted it. Alright, now that actually worked out pretty good. Worked out the way I, for the most part, pictured it in my head. Alright, now, definitely file, save. Now let's set this up to render. Because a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, but some people has complained that I get to this point and then I'm like, well, I'm done. Everybody knows how to render. But I'm going to go ahead and set this up to render, go through that whole process too. Now, anytime that I have an animation that's longer than 450 frames, I do not use static shots, or generally do not use static shots. And that's because if you're looking at a static shot for, more than 15 seconds, it gets kind of old pretty quick. So in this case, it's 850 frames, so I'm just going to have the camera sweep across. Alright. The easiest way to set this up is basically to put an object right here that well, actually we can just use the cup. We can tell the camera to look at the cup, and that's what we'll do. That'd be easier. Go back and press 0 to go back into camera view, and I'm just going to zoom in right there, and you can kind of use your mouse wheel to zoom the camera like that, as long as it's camera lock to view is not selected. Now I'm going to set it to lock camera to view. That way, if I wanted to, look around through the camera, I could. Alright. Now, let's, with the camera selected, come down here to the constraints tab. Add a constraint, and then use a track to constraint. Now this track to constraint, we're going to select cup. Now, no matter where we move this camera, it's going to continue looking at the cup. See what I mean? It just makes it a whole lot simpler. Now we're just going to set this camera up. Probably, I'm going to say 6 on the x-axis. On the y-axis, let's say minus 15. And on the z-axis, let's say 8.5. Alright. Not 5.5, 8.5. Alright, so that's your locations for the camera. The starting point for frame 1. These numbers down here you don't need to change. It won't affect anything anyway because we have the lock 2 or track 2 constraint turned on. So we're going to go ahead and hover over this and press I to keyframe that location, and we're going to go to the end of the animation, and then on the x-axis all we're going to do is put a minus in front of it, minus in front of the 6. That way it moves it over to here. Alright, and then I hover over it, press I to keyframe it, and if we go back to the beginning, the camera slowly moves over, sweeps across, and it stays tracked pointed straight at the camera, or pardon me, at the cup, because of the track 2. Now the alright, this is what I was kind of worried about. It's going to come off frame, so we're going to do this a little bit different. What we're going to do at this point, instead of tracking to the cup, we're going to track to an empty. So I'm going to press add, and then we're going to choose an empty. Now this empty is in the origin of the cup, so it's actually located at the same exact point the camera is currently pointing at. But we're going to come over here to the camera, choose the camera, change it from cup to empty. Now we're going to go back to this empty, select the empty, and then we're going to play this until it gets to about the time the force field starts coming on, which is about frame 400. Alright, and we're going to keyframe the location of this empty. I for keyframe for that empty. Now we're going to press play and let this play up until the force field is up high, and we're going to raise the location of this empty, which is what the camera is aiming at, to about here, and then we're going to keyframe that location, and that then as soon as the force field starts to drop back up just a hair, about right there, it doesn't have to be exact. Use your own interpretation or artistic whatever for this, and then keyframe the location one more time, and then go to about the time most of it's in the cup, which is about right here, and then just lower that empty just a hair. Alright, not much, just a little bit, and then press I one more time. So now if we play through it, it should stay completely in frame, and the camera movements are going to be nice and smooth. And that track 2 constraint really helps make sure you have good smooth camera movements. Alright, good enough. Now let's go ahead and at this point press File, Save. Save as your friend. come over here to the printer icon and set up an output. I'm going to create a new folder and I'm going to call this Toot. Enter. Go into that folder and accept. Now I have mine set to JPEG, but set yours to however you want. I have mine set to placeholders with the overwrite turned off because I'm going to be using 2 instances of Blender, 1 GPU per instance to render this, so it renders quicker. And I'm going to actually turn on let's see, I'm going to put this on probably 128 samples would be fine. Adaptive sampling, all of them set to 0. Denoising on the render set to optics. And this is another thing that helps, especially with glass. If you where to go? I believe it's in light paths. Clamping, yeah. If you copy these settings, 10 on the indirect and 15 on the direct, it helps keep down fireflies a whole lot so that the denoiser doesn't have to work as hard. And these are generally my typical settings that I like to use for the bounces, but by all means this will not affect the way this looks all that much. Barely will. Alright, now I do believe that's it. Yeah, that's all the settings. Let's render a test frame. I'm going to make sure I have my GPUs turned on, both of them optics. Turn the 3060 on also, and we'll go to about here and we'll render this frame just to see what it looks like. Alright, now I can tell you right now I need to add better lighting because the only light I have is this light that was default in the scene, which is right here, which I don't even want to keep. I'm just going to go ahead and press delete, and I'm going to add an HDRI texture. And if you don't have any HDRI textures, go to HDRI Haven and you can download a bunch of HDRIs for free. Alright, I'm going to add an environment texture, and I'm going to, I have one environment texture I like to use a lot. What happened here? I have no idea what happened there. But going to assets, that's for some reason it went to the wrong drive. I don't know why it done that. Alright, I'm going to use this one, which is one I use a lot for my tests. Alright, but use whatever environment texture you want to use. I will put a link to HDRI Haven in the description of this video where you can download whatever HDRI you want, which is basically just a background. It's a spherical background image that also contains lighting information. So yeah, you'll see what I mean. If I press render now, it's going to look a lot different. Yeah, that looks a lot better, don't it? Alright, now I think that's all I'm going to do here. No, I take it back. There's 2 more things I want to do. Go back to the camera, click on camera, go to depth of field, and set this to the empty. And I'm going to change this to 0.5. I'm going to test that out. Render image just to see if I got my depth of field right. And I need probably just a little bit more. 0.025, that way the background is more blurry, more out of focus. Render image, and right now it's basically the focus point is the empty. That's too much. That's why I put 0.025, 0.25, not 0.025. Alright, that should be right. Alright, yeah, that looks about right. Alright, now I want to turn on motion blur. Come up here to the whatever this one's called, render properties. Turn on motion blur, and I have found that generally the default settings work just fine, and that's just going to add a little bit of motion blur for fast moving particles. It doesn't really change it a lot, but it will make it look more smooth, I guess you could say. Alright, now since I'm going to use multiple GPUs, I'm going to go back to preferences. I'm going to turn off the 3060. I'm going to press File, Save, and now I'm going to start rendering the animation. Now I'm going to downsize that, or basically just unlock it from full screen. Bring this down to that size. Open up another instance of Blender. Give it a few seconds to open. Open up the same project. Free it from full screen. Size it over here. Bring this down a little bit in size. And go to Edit Preferences, and then set it so that it's using the 3060 render animation. And basically this one will do the next free frame, and then this one will do the next one. So while this is doing 10, this is doing 11, and then this one will do 12. You see what I mean? It goes faster when you do it this way. Big advantage to having multiple GPUs. Alright, I'm going to let this render, and then we'll call it quits. I'm not going to record this because it's going to take probably 3 hours, maybe 2 hours. So I guess that's it. If you have any questions about how to go about setting these up or anything, let me know, and I will do my best to try to explain it to you. Leave a comment. I guess that's it. Later, people. Alright, when I was rendering this, I realized I made a little bit of a mistake whenever I was creating the cup. Let me render a frame and show you what this looks like. Now, the problem is with the shading, and it doesn't look right at all. Now, I'm going to show you the changes I made to just kind of salvage it so it looks halfway decent, which realistically I should have just modeled the cup better. But instead of redoing it, I'm just going to make some changes to try to salvage it and make it look better. Alright, I'm going to change over here on the render properties. I'm going to change these to 4, all the 6s to 4, and then the 2s to 4 also, or at least those. And then this one I'm going to change to 0 since we don't have any volumetrics in this anyway. And I'm going to come over here. I'm going to make sure I select the cup. I'm going to come over here to oh yeah, I got to go back here to 3D viewport, and then go to object, and then put it on shade flat. Now the cup will look more like a cup you would find at a bar or something like that, that's actually has flat edges on it. Let me go ahead and render it so you see what it looks like. It's not going to be smooth, but you're not going to have that black look to it. You're actually going to be able to see through it, so it actually looks better. So yeah, normally what I should have done was just model this cut better, but I had a brain fart and I didn't, so this is my way of salvaging it. Alright, so now I'm going to go ahead and render him. I guess that's it. Later, people.